Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on socially conscious animal sheltering and socially conscious animal communities. My name is Allie Michelson. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Dumb Friends League in Denver.
And I'm Anna Yeager. I am the Program Manager of Statewide Engagement with the Dumb Friends League.
So we're going to go through what both socially conscious sheltering and socially conscious animal communities are in more detail. Because socially conscious sheltering is just one part of a socially conscious animal community, we're going to talk first about all the different components of a socially conscious animal community. So as I mentioned, socially conscious sheltering is just one part of a socially conscious animal community, but the idea is it takes all of us to create the best outcomes for pets. So it's not just shelters that influence that, it's veterinarians, it's policymakers, law enforcement, and of course pet owners and people in the community. So I'm going to go through what each of those audiences means and what socially conscious animal communities means for each of those audiences. The first is the community. The community plays a huge role in supporting socially conscious animal communities and socially conscious sheltering, whether they're adopting and fostering pets, volunteering with animal welfare organizations, or just caring for their own pets and providing for the basic medical and behavioral needs of their own pets. Everyone in the community has a role in creating the best outcomes. One of the newer tenets that was added to this is verifying information about animal welfare before sharing on social media or disseminating within the community. I think lately we've seen a lot of people who are willing to talk about what's going on in animal shelters based on limited information, and they end up sharing some information that may not be true. And unfortunately, that just destroys trust within the community, and that doesn't benefit animals. We work really hard to be transparent with the community, and so we just ask that the community really tries to be thoughtful about anything they post about animal adoptions or animal shelters or rescues when they are putting stuff online. The next is policymakers. Policymakers have a big role in socially conscious animal communities, mainly because they write the laws that influence animal welfare, and they tend to decide what funding goes into animal welfare organizations, particularly at the county and city and municipal level. So we ask that policymakers remember a few things. One is that we are your constituents. Animal welfare workers are your constituents, and your constituents love animals. So it is a big deal to them that animal welfare policy is part of the legislation and packages that policymakers are considering. We also ask that policymakers consult with animal welfare experts when they're making laws and policies related to animal welfare, because we want to make sure that we can work together to mitigate unintended consequences and just make the laws the best that they can be. We also empower lawmakers to really understand the impact of animal welfare laws on the community, and also understand the impact of funding, and that funding makes a big difference for the animals in the care of different municipal and local government level animal shelters. The next is law enforcement. Law enforcement plays a big role in socially conscious animal communities in a lot of ways. One of the things that we are trying to work with law enforcement to understand is that sometimes what looks like animal cruelty or neglect is really a lack of education or resources. So how can we work with pet owners and other human service and human resource providers to best support animal welfare organizations in supporting pet owners? How can we go into a cruelty and neglect situation and try to really understand what's going on and make sure that we seek the right care for not only the pets but also the people? Likewise, if we have a law enforcement agent that is going into a home that has pets, before they do whatever they need to do with the human in that home, that they also remember that care for that pets is an important part of their job and their responsibility when taking care of that family. Next is veterinarians. Veterinarians, of course, are really important, particularly in rural areas of the state you live in or anywhere across the country that doesn't have as much veterinary support. They can play a big role in lifting up shelters and rescues and helping out where they have short staffs. But the other big thing that we are trying to empower veterinarians is that they are a huge advocate for public policy. Lawmakers, policymakers really love to hear the perspective of veterinarians. They're very trusted in the community as experts in animal welfare. So we are hoping that as part of a socially conscious animal community, they'll work with animal welfare organizations and policymakers to ensure that we can really create the best policies and the best outcomes for pets. Next is rescue groups. Shelters and rescues work together a lot, and we really value that relationship, particularly in the ways we can create the best outcomes for pets. Some of the things that we encourage from rescue groups is working together to embrace the tenets of socially conscious sheltering, tailoring their policies to those of the community, working within state and local laws and focusing on the animals in their community and that support. And also collaborating with shelters to ensure that we can move animals between rescues and shelters in an effective way that allows us to move animals from places where they have fewer resources and opportunities to places where they have more. And the last audience for socially conscious animal communities is partners providing resources to pets and their people. Basically, this is people who are offering human services or human resource providers. How can we work together to make sure that the pet is considered part of the whole family and that pet owners receive the same care for their pets that they need when they are facing different situations in their own life? So if they are at a food pantry, can we also provide pet food at that pantry? Or if they are looking for housing, how can we support policies in our community that make sure that housing is pet friendly and accessible? So just really working with any kind of human resource providers to also partner and collaborate with pet resources.
So as Allie mentioned, socially conscious shelters are one piece of the socially conscious animal community, and we're going to dive in deeper to what that looks like. There are 9 tenets of socially conscious animal shelters, and I'm going to go through each one in a little bit more detail. Just to give you a little bit of background, this framework was created a few years ago, and it got started by a group of leaders in animal welfare in Colorado that had a conversation about all the progress we've made in animal welfare over the last decade, but how there seemed to be a little bit of disconnect in understanding in the community about the work that we're doing and the way that we work together as organizations. So this framework was created to be clear and direct, something that we can communicate to the public and between organizations so that we're all on the same page about our philosophies behind the decisions we make and the work that we're doing. So the map that you see here is all of the blue dots are organizations that have self-identified as socially conscious animal shelters. You don't have to fulfill any specific requirements. These are organizations that basically say, this is what we believe in and where we're headed. Maybe we're not fulfilling every single one of these tenets to the highest degree possible, but this is the work that we want to do and what we believe in when we're making decisions and designing our goals. We also have partners in Australia that you don't see represented on this map, but it is a worldwide initiative that's taking off. So, as I mentioned, there are 9 tenets. The first tenet is ensuring every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go for shelter and care. So this doesn't mean that every socially conscious animal shelter is an open admission shelter. Certainly there are shelters that fit that criteria, but what it means is that we as a collaboration of organizations are saying within our community, it's really important that when a person finds a stray animal or has a pet they can no longer care for, they have options. So they're not going to be turned away within their community without anywhere to bring that pet. And that can involve a lot of collaboration between open admission shelters, between rescues, even between emergency vet hospitals, if we're talking about a relinquishment that happens on off hours. It's something that we need to recognize as a priority within our community and work together. The second tenet is that socially conscious shelters place at least every healthy and safe animal. So it's important to call out that we're saying at least every healthy and safe animal, because a lot of organizations that are socially conscious are able to go even above that. And it's really dependent on what your community can support, and that will be individual based on where you are. But these definitions are helpful. So in this context, healthy means no signs of clinical disease, or if there's evidence of disease, there's a reasonable expectation for a good quality of life. And safe means has not exhibited behavior that is likely to result in bodily injury or death to another animal or person. So at a socially conscious shelter, what we're striving for is that every animal that fits these criteria, we're going to find a positive outcome for them, either through adoption or through transfer to another organization that can do that. So the next tenet is assessing the medical and behavioral needs of homeless animals and ensuring that these needs are thoughtfully addressed. This tenet's going to look different at every organization based on the resources you have available, but it means in every case, each animal is being assessed medically and also behaviorally so that they're not suffering when they're in our care and they're getting appropriate resources. Sometimes this means transferring animals to organizations that have more resources than you're able to offer, looking at things like foster homes or building basic enrichment programs are also something that can help fulfill this tenet. The next tenet is alleviating suffering and making appropriate euthanasia decisions. This is one of the most difficult aspects of our work, but it's also something that's really important. Sometimes euthanasia is the most humane choice we can make for an animal, and what this tenet talks about is that every time we do this, we need to have a thoughtful process that we go through so that our team as a whole understands why and when we make these decisions, and we stand behind them as the best option for that animal. The next tenet is aligning policy with the needs of the community. So what this tenet says is that animal sheltering is not a one-size-fits-all. Each community needs to be listening and responding to what our community members are telling us they need from us. So in some cases, this looks like offering low-cost vaccine clinics or potentially opening up an animal hospital in your community. It can be things like offering services for community cats if that's an issue that your community is facing. Really just taking time to understand what's going on and how our shelter can support our community beyond just the shelter walls. The next tenet is enhancing the human-animal bond through thoughtful placements and post-adoption support. So for our team that works in adoptions, we really want to focus on making the best match at that time, which can include really taking time to understand the needs of the adopter, what they're looking for, communicating really clearly with adopters about the animals they're interested in and what medical and behavioral needs they have. But it also means that after that animal comes home, we recognize that a lot of times that transition can be tricky. So it's looking at things such as having a behavior hotline or training classes to help support any of the issues that arise. It also means that we need to recognize in some cases that match wasn't the right one. So we need to accept those animals back into our shelters without judgment of the adopter, recognizing that we're all trying to do the right thing and make sure the animal's in the best home possible. So next is considering the health and wellness of each animal and each community when transferring animals between communities. So we know in animal welfare that transfer partnerships have saved many lives. But what socially conscious animal sheltering says is that we need to do this in the most thoughtful way possible. So for the individual animals that we're moving from community to community, how can we do that in a way that is humane for them? We can also look at that animal and is there potential for that animal to be bringing disease or a behavior issue that's going to negatively impact the community they're coming into? It also means we should examine our own community first and ensure that there are adequate resources that the pets that are here already before we're bringing in animals from elsewhere. And we should be looking at the communities that are source communities and how we can support those communities in other ways beyond just transferring animals out. So could we help with spay-neuter or humane education to try to stop some of those issues before they happen? The eighth tenet of socially conscious animal sheltering is implementing inclusive policies and practices. So this is really important because the more open and equitable we are at our organizations for people, the more animals we're going to be able to help. And this really is at all levels of our organization. So we need to be looking at inclusion and equity when we're designing our strategic plans, when we are considering hiring. You know, does our organization reflect the diversity of our community? Also, when we're interacting with the public, do we have resources available in the languages that are spoken? Are there segments of our community that have felt disconnected from the services we provide, and how can we reach out to them more? Sometimes, you know, there are other organizations that are doing a really good job of this and reaching the people we want to reach. Maybe we can partner with those organizations to have more access. And the last tenet of socially conscious animal sheltering is fostering a culture of transparency, ethical decision-making, mutual respect, continual learning, and collaboration. So this philosophy is woven throughout the other tenets, but it really sums up the way that we can interact with the public and each other in collaboration. So the more we're able to gain trust from the public, the more people are going to feel comfortable accessing our resources and the better outcomes we're going to have for pets. So how can we make sure people know that the information we're giving is reliable, and that the decisions we make are done from a place of wanting to help? And then when we're working with other organizations, we're going to be able to do so more if we trust each other, we respect each other, we're able to learn from each other and not compete with each other. This is the way that the collaboration will be able to create positive outcomes for pets all over the country and the world.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want more information about socially conscious sheltering, please visit the website, www.scsheltering.org. You will also see our information here, and you are welcome to reach out to us with questions anytime. If we can't answer them, we will connect you with an expert in the community that can. Thanks so much.
Thank you.